gonna see. Learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all. And if by chance press your play, woo, and you've been dreaming of leads you to a lonely place. Find your strength in love. Oh, oh, ooh, yeah. Ooh, wah. Holy moly, good grief, God, googly, googly moogly. The greatest love of all. Man, you ain't never seen me like this before. I'm about to cry. Let me tell you kids a story. Now, hold on. Man, I was about in the 5th grade. I wasn't feeling that great. Some of you guys might have heard this story, pieces of it, about how some people went off on my boy Ching, man. It's back when on the blog I did about bronies. Well, anyway, some people went on my boy Ching. He's a Chinese kid, and I couldn't take it anymore, man. It was one thing for the kids to be picking on me, but they started picking on Ching, and I snapped. I started going crazy because I love Ching, man. I love Ching because I love myself, and I went off. And you know what inspired me to go off? Might not make that much sense to you, but I'm going to put it out there anyway. It was this song. Whitney Houston's Greatest Love of All. Somehow, they let my no-singing self be in chorus, and we were singing, and our teacher, Miss Richmond, had us singing The Greatest Love of All. And I was like singing that song, and I was listening to the words, man. I said, hold on. First of all, they were saying they believe the children are the future. We won't even get into that. But what they also did was, in that song, they revealed something that I don't understand how we don't get it. The greatest love of all is easy to achieve. Learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all. And I want to talk about that right now because it is the greatest love of all. I'm seeing all this stuff going on in the world, and I'm thinking to myself, why can't we just love ourselves? Why can't we just love ourselves enough to not put ourselves in harm's way? Why can't we just love ourselves enough to love our neighbors? Why can't we love ourselves enough to receive this infinitely, always pouring, always giving love of God? Because if we loved ourselves, we could receive it. But we don't. And so when we don't love ourselves, we actually become part of the problem. We look at the world and we say, why? Why is it so bad? I'm sorry to tell you this. You may not want to hear it. The world is that way because you do not love yourself. If you ask that question, that's why. Because you don't love yourself. But if you love yourself, you can be part of the solution. If you saw my post that I just did on bullying, I talked about how loving ourselves is the way to overcome bullying. Some people might not want to hear that, but it's true. Okay? I'm putting it out there. It is true. Love yourself. Once upon a time, not long ago, or actually kind of long ago, like 2,000 years, a guy asked Jesus, what, Jesus, are the greatest commandments? And Jesus said, love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And the others like it, love your neighbor as who? As yourself. Now this is important because if you don't love yourself, you will not love your neighbor. And if you don't love your neighbor, guess what? You actually can't love God, because there's also a word in there that says you can't say you love God and hate your brother or sister. It's impossible because God is love. So all of this thing is tied into loving yourself, loving the creation that God has brought forth, and not in an egotistical love. Like some people think that if you don't love yourself, you're somehow doing God a favor. You are not doing God a favor by hating yourself. Not at all. It's actually very much the opposite. Because God created you out of love. Now think about this. You sit here putting yourself down and thinking that it's pious. Well, that in and of itself is actually destructive of the whole world. Because we are part of an integrated whole. There is no such thing as separation. So this idea that a person can love themselves as a separate being from the rest of creation in and of itself is a lie, because there's no such thing as the separation that you think these people who think they love themselves in an egotistical way. Well, we're part of the whole. So to love yourself is to love the whole, if you know who you really are. If you think you're some separate entity that's not connected to everything else, then you're deceiving yourself. And yes, you're equally a part of the problem. And the love of yourself that you might think you have is not actually true, because the love of yourself is contingent upon other people agreeing that the self you've created, which isn't actually a real being but an illusion, that if people approve of the illusion and you approve of this same illusion, somehow you're loving yourself. No, sir. It is not a fact. This real fact is that you're part of the oneness of all life. And when you love yourself, that love that you love of your true self as identifying with the whole automatically goes into the fullness of humanity and the fullness of the creation that God has set before you. And so when you love yourself, you automatically love your neighbor as yourself, because you know that that neighbor is a part of the whole. And the whole is created by God, who is wholeness. I could explain it more. I could say it in a whole bunch of different ways. But that's not going to take away the fact that loving yourself is an integral part of being a part of this thing that I'm talking about. And it is the greatest love of all. And it's hard for some people to get their minds wrapped around that, because we've been taught this lie that we are like some disgusting creatures, that if we hate ourselves, somehow we're loving God. But you cannot hate yourself or anyone else enough to love God. Do you understand me? You cannot hate yourself or anyone else enough to love God. Those of you who have extended your hatred of self onto others, thinking that somehow you're doing God a favor, you are not doing anything. You're not doing anyone a favor by hating anyone, because God is love. And you cannot love God and hate your neighbor. So if you're fooling yourself into believing that, sorry, Captain, it ain't happening. So let's back up. Let's come back to the love that is the originator of all things. When you come in contact with this love which dwells within you, you receive and you extend, and you become a part of this whole creation. A beautiful part of this whole creation. Not becoming a part of it because you weren't it at first, but becoming aware that you have always been a part of it. You always will be a part of it. Is this a mystery? It does not have to be. It's only if you want to be distracted from the reality that that's very love that you must receive from yourself or of yourself to know yourself has to be extended to all. You can't keep it to yourself and be like, I'm awesome, everybody else sucks. No. You're gonna have to pour it out, because it's so grand and so vast and so filling that you can pour it out and pour it out and pour it out and never run out. That's the love of God. That's the love that you came forth from. And it's the love that wants to flow through you into all of creation. But it begins with loving yourself as a part of that creation, so that you can receive it and the joy that comes with it, and then pour it out to the others. I want to say so much more of this, but it's like I'm so caught up in my excitement that I can't think of any other things to say. I did write down a couple things, and I think I touched it. Yeah, I think I did. In the 5th grade, they had us singing The Greatest Love of All. Yeah, I touched that. All right, what else? Well, who knows? What I'm going to do is I'm going to put this video up. I'm going to write a couple things, point out a couple of verses that I mentioned. Then I'm going to put a video of Whitney Houston singing this song, and hopefully you'll feel the vibe from that. And what else will I do? Well, can't think of anything else. But anyway, love yourself.